500200. Here we have no continuing city. Little Rock, Arkansas, USA. But it's for His glory that I say it. God bless you. Now in the 13th chapter of Hebrews, I wish to read some scripture because no service is complete without the reading of God's word. My word will fail. Everybody's word will fail, but God's word will never fail. Hebrews 13:10-14. Here we have an altar, whereof they which have no right to eat, which served the tabernacle, for the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin, are burnt without the camp. Therefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate. Let us go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. Now here's my text, for here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. I imagine my voice has a little blast in there, and I'll get back to, can you hear right up in the balcony, up in the second balcony? Alright, what I wish to speak on is here we have no continuing city. To kind of back up and you pray with me, there's no one that I think of when Abraham left the city of Ur in the land of Chaldean. He was seeking a city whose builder and maker was God. Now there was something in Abraham that he could see that great city of Ur, and he knew that that very thing that made people recognize together, there was bound to be a city somewhere that was typed off of. And by instinct or by leading of the Holy Spirit, he hunted that city whose builder and maker was God. And he sojourned in a strange land, professed to be pilgrims and strangers, seeking a city and dwelling in tents with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so then we see that city. There's no matter how many places you ever roamed, no matter how far you go, there's no place like home. Is that right? How many here today is away from home? Let's see your hands. Just away from home. Oh my, I wish I could sing. I'd sing, we're pilgrims and a stranger seeking a city to come. Be it ever so humble, there is no place like home. Let's take a little trip back home. Would you like to do that? I believe everyone here would like to take a trip home, wouldn't you? Just like to go back home. There's no place that you'll ever go that will ever seem like that lovely little city, old city you lived in, or little old dwelling place out in the country. For myself, I want to walk back down the road just this afternoon with each one of you, taking a little evening stroll to review the things over. The first thing comes into my mind at this time is a little humble home built out in the country by the Broom Siege fields and some old apple trees standing around, where my father and mother and their little family lived. A little humble place indeed. There, we were very, very poor. Daddy had a hard time. He was a very poor man. He worked for 75 cents a day in Longwood. My father had a bad habit, drinking. I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's true. And my father, died in my arms. I seen my daddy work so hard till when he would come in, his back would be sunburned until his shirt would be sticking to his back, and mother would have to take and clip the shirt loose from his back. I don't care what he done. He's my daddy. I'm not ashamed of my father. I love my daddy. He's gone on today, but he's still daddy. And young people, remember, if you're fortunate enough today to have a daddy and a mother living, love them, honor them. The hour will come when you'll think they're the greatest people in the world. If you don't know, and don't ever, little fellows, don't never give this slandering word old man and old woman. That's not the old man and old woman, that's daddy and mother. And some of these days, when they go out of the room in this casket or flowers, you hear them lowered in the ground. The pastor say ashes to ashes and dust. It won't be the old man then, or won't be the old woman. It'll be mother. You'll be wringing your hands and crying. That's right. Now, while she's living, give her her flowers now, and give dad his flowers. That's right now. And the best law you can give them is obey them. And that's the first promise in the Bible, the first commandment with promise, honor thy father and mother, which may lengthen the days upon the earth that the Lord giveth thee. My daddy worked on a farm. I remember mother, the furniture we had in the house was the old hickory bottom chairs. How many remember the old hickory bottom chairs wrapped? Well, I'm not the only country person in here, am I? And we had an old kerosene lamp with a big old hoot awl on the chimney. Remember them, old awls? It used to be the one I had to clean it because my hand was so little. I could clean the chimney, and we had an old cook stove in the kitchen. And Pap would cut the wood, and he'd bring it in and lay it behind the stove, and us little kiddies would help him sew it up. And we had a table, and behind the table was a bench. Daddy took a piece of a bun and made a bench that we little boys would go sit on that. We only had 3 chairs, and so we would get on. And I remember the cabin, the front part of it, it had a floor. It had room in front and a little half room in the back. And we had one of those little old, we call them monkey stoves or laundry stoves, set on a stump. And mother cooked from there, and she'd holler, "Dinner's ready." And there's about 5 of we little Branhams. We'd run in there and wash our face and slick that hair down and jump up behind the table. And the great old pot dinner cooked in an old 3-legged kettle. How many remembers them? Say, I just love to have a dinner out of one right now. And we'd should take and get beef and make mulligan stew. How many knows what mulligan stew is? I'm not the only Irishman in here. Am I? So they'd put the mulligan stew in there, and my plate was a tin plate, frankly, and it had a big bucket lid that was turned over. So I'd get a good measure every time the cup went down and dipped out of the mulligan stew. And we'd bake cornbread in a pan. How many remembers old cornbread baked in a pan? Cut it in the middle, put it on, and I'd sit next to Daddy because every person broke his own bread. And so when he'd come by, I'd break the corner off because it had the more crust on it. It was just so good. And so I sure like that yet. Yes, I sure do. I've eaten many good places, and some of the places, I guess, in the nation that minister friends of mine has taken me to dinner, which I'm very, very thankful. But friends, I'd give everything if I had, or ever will have, if I could sit behind that old table one more time and look at my daddy sitting there and eat some mulligan stew with him. I'll never do it no more. That's right, it's done forever. Enjoy your childhood, young people. Love God. See all my brothers sat around there, the little healthy looking things, some of them's in eternity. I can never do that no more. For here we have no continuing city, but a seeking one to come. I used to see my daddy when we'd come in. He's a little fellow about my size and strong built, and he would wind up his sleeves like that. And we had eat out on the old apple tree and had a washpan setting out there with an old piece of a glass with stove drove up in the tree and a towel made out of a meal sack. And we'd go out there and wash at this old bench, and then we'd clean up on the outside. There's a little bench around the tree. I'd see Daddy when he'd be combing his black wavy hair, and the muscles would just wallow under his arm. I thought, oh my daddy will live to be 1,000 years old. I'd think I admired my daddy, and I'd think how strong he is. I said, he'll live and live and live and live, because he's so strong. He died at 52. For here we have no continuing city. Now I thought, oh, that house, how big. Beneath it was logs, and it was kind of slab board on the outside. I thought, oh, how that house will stand for hundreds of years. Today, there's a housing project there. Here we have no continuing city, but we're seeking one to come. That's right. I passed by just before coming here. I'm just so a great swelling in my heart. Oh God, how can just 20 years make such a difference in a place? But here we have no continuing city. We are seeking one to come. And I thought of Daddy. And also, I remember every Saturday night, we'd go to town and pay the grocery bill. And every time we'd pay a grocery bill, Mr. Grower would give us, the grocery man, give us a little sack of candy. I think our grocery bill ran to the extent of $3 a week. And my daddy only made about 4.5. So Mom would get some goods, and at Guy, my wife sitting here, I'm afraid to say what kind of goods that was, because I make a mistake on it every time. Anyhow, it's some kind of that little stuff, that they used to make shirts out of. I remember one time at my church, I said to one of the worst I ever was gotten at my church, I was going to have a humble night on Wednesday night, and I said, and my choir was all sitting behind me, and I said, and that what Gangh, Jan J Gingham. That's what it is, name Gingham. And I said, and I was trying to think of that. And there's an old place down the road called Gingham Cottages. And I'll try to think of that. And I said, I'm sure to make a mistake when I say that. So I had a little girl by the name of Irene Wiseheart singing in the choir. I said, now, Sister Wiseheart, when I back, if I forget about it, you tell me what that was. So I didn't understand anything about goes like that. And I said, now, Wednesday night is humble night here at the tabernacle. I said, now, all you brothers, wear your work clothes, your overalls. I'm going to preach in my overalls. I said, you all come out with your overalls. And all the women wear your. I was walking back. I backed back, and she said, Gingham. And I said, your greyhound dresses, and that was about the worst I ever got in it. And everybody started to laughing at me, and I thought, well, I guess I done said it. So I said, ever what that goods is like on this little cottage down here. Then one night I was run home, I was patrolling, and I used to carry those great big old red handkerchiefs. When you hunt, you have to have a red handkerchief, and I'd carry one in my pocket. And one night I ran in, and we lived in a little two-room cabin, and I ran across the street real quick to church. I was late. I ran across the street real quick, and I dressed it in the room and changed clothes, and I was over there just preaching away, and I got to perspiring. And I reached back and got this handkerchief, and I started shaking it like this. And I looked at it, and it was a big old red handkerchief. I see my little old wife looking at me, and I said, oh, well, I said, I'm afraid of them little ones, afraid I'd swallow it. So I said, there's about two of the worst I ever knew was gotten in church. But I remember Daddy would take us down on Saturday night and pay the grocery bill and get those little old sack of candy. And we had a little old Jersey wagon. You all call them out here backboards, I believe, or whatever. And they put some straw in the back, and it'll be cold, and we'd wrap up in blankets and go down, and it'll be speaking snow. And they'd pay the grocery bill, and all these little Irish sitting out there waiting, for this candy to come. Then we'd come out, and that candy had to be equally broken among everyone. If there's one stick over, it was broken into so many pieces, to be sure. Every little blue eye was watching right at it, to be sure he never got cheated. So we'd sit and eat that. And I'd play a little trick on them. Now we wouldn't eat it, I wouldn't chew it, because it was too valuable, that old sticky candy. And we'd suck on it a little while, then hold it, wait a little while, rest up, suck on it again. Well, I remember I used to play a trick on them. I'd suck on my piece for a while and wrap it up in a piece of paper and put it in my pocket. And I had some from Monday, and I'd suck on it again and tell all the boys, don't you wish you had some? And I'd just put that piece on the dirt and candy and all of it roll. And they was good, and I guess I could go tomorrow and buy the whole box of chocolates, Hershey's, if I wanted to. But it will never taste like that. That was real candy, and I remember those old days and how glorious they was. And how that going to school, when school days come along, we went to school. We didn't have any clothes to wear hardly, to just enough that we possibly legally could go. I remember going to school all winter long with one of my mom's shoes on and one of Pap's. That's right. We called it a boot and gaga. And I had one of mom's shoe on this foot and Pap's. And this is awfully to say, but it's the truth. It's the truth. I remember I didn't have any shirt to wear that winter, and Mrs. Watham, a rich lady lived up the road from us, gave me a little coat that had a little eagle emblem on it, and I'd pull that coat up like this and go to school. and go on to school. I remember setting up there and got kind of warm, and the teacher said, William. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, aren't you warm? Better take off that coat. I couldn't take that coat off. I didn't have any shirt on. So I said, why? No, ma'am. I said, I'm just a little bit chilly. They had a great big old stove sitting over there. She said, you ain't taking a cold. You go over and sit by that stove. My, I sat there and the perspiration ran down on my face. She said, aren't you warm yet? I said, no, ma'am, I was still plenty warm. But I couldn't take the coat off. I didn't have any shirt on. And so I remember that spring when I got my first shirt, and I had a cousin, a girl, Lucille Hare, and my father's sister's child. They come over to visit. And when she left one of her dresses. And I cut the skirt part off and wore the top part as a shirt. I went to school, and it had this here little, what is that stuff that runs up and down, like that. They put it around the edges of garments, rackelty, or whatever I missed that, rick-rack. And so we, all of it everywhere, rick-rack over it, so that's down the hill would go riveting. Well, we wasn't sliding like the rest of the boys, but we were sliding anyhow. We were getting there anyhow in this old dishpan. Well, that was alright, but some of the boys had sleighs, you see, so after a while, the bottom came out of it. And so we had no more sleigh, and we went down the river, and I got me a big old log, put a wire on it, and pulled it up to the top of the hill. And we'd get on that log and ride down the hill. I never will forget an event taking place there. There's a boy named Lloyd Ford, Brother Graham. Ever where you're at, my associate pastor here somewhere, Lloyd Ford, he got him a job. That was in the time of the World War, so he got him a job selling Pathfinders or something like that, magazines. And he got to wear one of them Boy Scout suits, and everything was war then, and army, and how I wanted to dress like a soldier. I'd see those soldiers come up from the quartermaster and go up the road there just at attention, walking. And at the school, we had an old sassafras pole there and raise the flag, and those soldiers come by, would salute the flag. I thought, how? Oh my heart just beat. When I got big enough, I'm going to join the army. I'll get plenty of clothes to wear, and if I can join the army. But when I got big enough, I was too scurvy to get in the army, and they wouldn't even take me. But somebody accepted me. That's right. I'm in the army today. You might not be able to see my uniform, but I know it's on anyhow. It's on the inside. I'm in the army of the Lord. And so in the war, I tried to volunteer and everything, but they didn't receive me. So they never even called me, put me in the minister's class, and just never even called me. I guess my education was too poor to be classed as a chaplain. And then, being a minister, they didn't draft me, and so there I was left out. But somehow or another, and even with my scummy, uneducated and all, God sent out a recruit one day, and I answered it, and I'm in his army now, and I'm doing the best that I can to fight the greatest battle that's ever fought, a wage against sin and evil and for righteousness. And I remember I asked Lloyd, I said, Lloyd, will you give me that suit when you wear it out? He said, yes, I'll give it to you. And that was the longest lasting suit I ever seen. He wore that suit, looked like when I seen him one time, he come up missing it. And I said, Lloyd, what about that suit? He said, I'll see if I can find that, Billy. He looked all around. He said, no, sir. Mother patched up Daddy's clothes with it, and the dogs used it for a pallet, and they dragged it away and said, the only thing I got left is one legging. I said, bring me that. And so it was a little old stave legging out like that, laced up on the side. So I took that legging, and I wore it around home, put it on. I looked like how good and that looked, One legging, thought, that felt good. I wanted to wear it to school. But I didn't know just how I was going to wear that leggy to school. So I put it inside my coat. And I was riding on that log one day, and I went down the hill, and I got up and I said, I hurt my leg. Whew, I said, my stockings, and great big holes in them. And I said, I just hurt my leg so bad. I said, that just reminds me, I got one of my Boy Scout leggings here in my coat, and I put that legging on my I walked into school, kind of limping, like you're getting everybody looking at one legging. And so I had to go up to the problems on the blackboard, and so that they wouldn't notice I just had on one legging. I stood sideways and put this legging on that side and stood like this and worked the problems like this. Look out and see if everybody was looking at me. That one legging on, everybody got to laughing at me. I got to crying. So she made me calm down, but oh, my something there. I got a pair of leggings today that I'm not ashamed of. That's right, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then many great things happened in childhood back there that I wouldn't have time to approach. One thing not long ago, I was having a revival in Texas. I come home and wife and I and the baby, we went up the road and I just so tired. I just felt like I'd drop. I just couldn't stand it. And on the road home, I was driving and I got to sleep. And I'd drive about a couple of miles, then I'd stop, I'd try to sleep, then I'd wake up, and I'd drive a little farther and I'd get sleepy and just almost go off the road. And I'd stop. I thought, this is awfully dangerous, but I must get home. And I would lay down in my car and try to sleep. I woke up after a while, and you know what had happened? I'm driving. I'd run over off the road, and I was out on the cow pasture, holding my hand out like and saying, sister, believe it. That's all you have to do. If you ever get healed, then you believe it. Way out there in the pasture, where I'd run off the road and out to the field there, and asleep. And wife and I, there's a great crowd of people waiting there. And so we got in the car and went up the road. I passed by the old schoolhouse. It's gone too, for we have no continuing city. And right across from there used to be Mr. Weather Chauffeurs, and they live there. There's a pump that I wanted to drink out of, and I thought, just like David one time wanted to drink out of that well. And I went down there and began to pump the water. And wife and baby and them was picking violets. I was leaning across the old fence and looking at the old hill, there where the school used to be, and the old trees, the sugar maples, where I used to tap them and suck the sap on them in the spring of the year, when it was coming up. And I thought, oh, I could just imagine seeing all those little boys standing lined up there with their hands on one another's shoulders, trampling like this, and the flag up, and we were going in, the teacher with a great long willow, making us line up just straight. And I looked up on the hill and see the old home where it used to be, and housing project up there. Down there, the old school was gone, and my heart began to swell up. I thought, here we have no continuing city, but we are seeking one to come. I remember the boys that I use. I said, let me think. Ralph Fields, where's he at? He's gone. Where's Howard Higgins? Dead. Where's my brother? Gone. Here we have no con. Where's Dad? He's gone. Where's Charles? Gone. Where's Edward? Gone. I thought, oh God, and soon somebody look at this ground and say, where's Bill? Gone. Here we have no continuing city. I begin to think of it. My heart began to pound. I remember a little dirty trick that I done my brother there. Don't do anything wrong that you'll ever regret. I remember one day that Mama gave us some popcorn to take to school with us. We couldn't eat with the rest of the kids. We'd always run over the hill there and eat, because we, the rest of the children, could afford sandwiches. And we used to have a little jar. In there would be greens and a piece of corn bread laying on the side, and 2 spoons, and maybe a little jar full of stuff, and we'd set and both of us eat out of this jar with this spoon and eat our bread and pass it back and forth to one another. We were so ashamed before the children, and we'd run over the hill and eat behind the trees over there. I remember Mama getting us some popcorn around Christmas. We had a sack of it, and we took it to school, left it in the cloakroom. And here, the little dirty trick that I did, I held up my hand. Teacher said, "What do you want, William?" I said, "May I be excused?" Said, "Yes, ma'am, yes, sir." And I went out the building and went out through the cloakroom. I put my hand down in that sack and got a great big handful of that popcorn. Went out and stood behind the school and eat this popcorn to be sure that I got my share of it. And I was eating that popcorn. I never will forget. When dinner time came, we went out and got a bucket and got a popcorn. My brother looked in that sack and about half of it was gone. He said, "Hey," said, "something happened there, didn't it?" I said, "Sure did." I know what had happened. I'd eat his popcorn. So, but he shared the rest of it. And standing there leaning over that fence, I thought of all those things. He's the one that's gone on. He died in the hospital calling for me when I was in Arizona many, many years ago. Friends, if I'd had $100 million laying before me, I'd have give everything that I had if I could took him that handful of popcorn back again. Couldn't do it. He's gone on. And I thought how hard he had to live. He died when he was just a boy, and how that he tried to share our clothes and one another. And just before he died, he put his hand over his heart, said, "I will never live to see Bill again," but said, "Tell him he's my favorite brother." And when down there, I was thinking about that then. I started crying. Wife said, "Why don't you come home to rest?" And she seen what was going on. So she got me away and went on up the road. Life when one is a child, it was a boyhood, Al Harry. I was a young man. I seen the way women lived. I never did like girls, never did like women, because I got enough to see the way they would live. If anything, respect in a woman is being true. I don't care if she's colored, white, whatever she is. If she's a real lady, she deserves the highest of respects. God knows that. And I purposed in my heart when I was a little boy that I'd never have nothing to do with women. I'd be a hunter all my life, and that's what I did, friend. And I'd live in the woods, hunt all night, and that's why I learned God was by nature. I remember when, of course, when I got to be about 17 or 18 then, as all boys, some boy, friend of mine, his daddy had a car, James Paul, and he had a little girl he wanted to meet. And you know how you are? I seen that little girl, and I thought she was the prettiest little thing I ever seen. You know, teeth like pearls, eyes like a dove, neck like a swan. Oh my, just prettiest thing you ever seen. So said she wants to meet you, Bill. And I said, "Oh," I said, "I don't know how to talk to a woman." I said, "I can't do that." And he said, "Oh, come on." So I talked to her a few times, and after a while he said I'd get Dad's old car and said we'd take our girlfriends a riding. I thought, well now, that wouldn't be bad. So we went out. We stopped down there to get some sandwiches, and I went in and got some cokes and some sandwiches and come back out. And we ate that sandwiches, and I took the cakes back and the coke bottles back. When I went back, I come out. To my surprise, my little girlfriend was smoking a cigarette. Well, I always had my opinion of a cigarette smoking woman, and I haven't changed it yet. It's the most lowest, immoralist, degrading thing that a woman can do. I'm not here to preach the gospel in that manner. A preacher will do that. But women, if you do smoke, for mercy's sake, get away from it. How cheap it looks in a woman that will smoke a cigarette. My, it's the cheapest thing. I'd rather see her drunk anytime. And listen, you talk about a sabotage. Don't you worry about Russia coming in and getting us. Russia ain't going to hurt us. We're hurting ourselves. It's our own moral decay that's hurting us. We are corrupting ourselves. Statistics show that by doctors, I believe, that 80% of women that has children that smoke cigarettes, if they'd raise their body like they should to the breast in 18 months, it dies. It kills the baby. The nicotine poison in the milk of the mother. Why? Sabotage. Fifth columnist. I still say what this world needs today is not a new president. It needs an old-fashioned St. Paul revival and the Bible Holy Ghost back in the church again. I believe that's right. Yes, sir. That's exactly what it needs. And the women, how they could smoke. And I thought that was terrible to see a woman smoke. Well, That was just broke my heart. I couldn't stand that. I didn't want nothing to do with that. So I just left her. And so that was a time when the angel of the Lord appeared to me when she laughed at me, called me a sissy. She made me walk home. That's right, from the place. She said, "Well, you big sissy, I wouldn't even ride with you." I said, "You don't have to." She said, "You don't smoke?" I said, "No, ma'am." Said, "You don't drink either?" I said, "No, ma'am." Said, "What do you like to do?" I said, "I go fishing, hunting." Cause that didn't interest her. So that was way I thought about it anyhow. And I'm glad today that I did think that. That's right, amen. Listen, friends, it ain't the robin that pecks the apple that hurts it. It's a worm at the core that kills the apple. That's that. What? It's a sin in our midst is what are hurting us. That's right. Sin in our midst that's killing us. Now, I guess you wonder how I ever got married. Well, when I met my wife, she was a Christian girl, very lovely Christian girl, and was about 23, 24 years old. She was a very sweet, humble character, and I met her, and I'd take her to church, and she went to church, and she was a very fine, lovely woman. All these people here, my friends from Jeffersonville, sitting here in front of me knows her or knew her, and how a lovely woman she was. She's in her grave today, but that's her body, her soul's in with Christ. And she was a very lovely Christian character. And I went with her a while, and she come from a good home. Her father, during the time of the depression, he made about $600 a month. He was a brotherhood organizer on the Pennsylvania Railroad. I made 20 cents an hour digging ditches, so I couldn't marry the girl. I didn't think, and I thought, well, if I have went with her any longer, I was taking up her time. She was too good of a girl to let go. She'd make some man a good wife. So I had to either just let her go or ask her to marry me. And I didn't have nerve enough to do that. So I guess, wonder how I wrote her a letter and asked if she'd marry me. And I said, well, now, it wasn't, "Dear Miss, will you have me?" It was a little bit what you call mushier than that. And I kind of talked to her. But here I remember I thought I got to do something because it's not right to take the girl's time. So I wrote her a letter. And I went to work that morning. I was working in the public service company, and I was very nervous about dropping it in the box. It was on Monday morning. I dropped it in the box, and all day I thought about it, and I thought, tonight, oh, I'll hear from that tonight. Her mother will call me up and rake me over the coals. And I went on that night. It was all right. And I was to meet her Wednesday to take her over to the church. So I remember, then come on Wednesday, and Wednesday night, I was just as nervous. I didn't know what to do. I thought, what am I going to do when I get up there? So I asked my mother, has Hope called? No. Did you get any mail? No. Well, maybe it hung up and didn't even get out of the box. So I thought something happened here. So I went up and I blowed the horn outside, and so she came out. She said, "Come in," and I thought, oh, going to get me in there with her mother is now, and then I'm really going to get it. So I said, "Are you about ready?" She said, "Let's walk to church." I thought, oh my. So I said, all right. And I went in. And Mrs. Brambach looked at me, said, "Hello, Bill." I said, "How do you do?" So I was just nervous as I could be. So I thought something's going to happen anytime. You know how you feel when you are under them strains? So we went on out and went to church. Honest, I didn't even hear what Brother Davis said that night. He just preached away, and I didn't know what he said. I was scared something was going to happen. And I'd look at her and I thought, oh my, ain't she pretty? And she's going to tell me this is all of it. She was the world, because I could just tell that I'd known she was going to tell me, stay home after tonight. So I had it all fixed up what she was going to tell me. And after church was over, we started walking back, a pretty moonlight night. We were walking down the street, and I looked up to see the moon shining down through the bushes. Went on, and I looked at her, and I thought, my, I'd hate for this to be the last night, but I guess this is it. I walked on, and I said, how are you tonight? She said, Just fine. How are you? I thought, hurry up, lady, tell me something before I faint. Don't get too close to home. We walked on a little further, and I said, sure, it's a pretty night. She said, yes, it is. I thought, well, why? Hurry up, say something, Women can just keep you like that anyhow, under that suspense. And I walked on. I thought, well, she's getting pretty close to home. I said, uh-huh. Did you get any mail this week? She said, aha, that was all. And I said, did you get my letter? She said, aha. My, oh my, I certainly is burning energy then. And I said, well, I said, did you read it? She said, aha. My, I said, what do you think of it? She said, it was all right. Phew, my. And I said, did you read it, all of it? She said, yes, I read all of it. It all? I said, what do you think of it? She said, it was all right. Well, we got married. And there it was. I don't know how. We just got married. So, the next train came when I had to ask her mother and daddy. Well, I knew it was appropriate to do that. So I never will forget Charlie Brambach. He may be sitting right here this afternoon, for all I know. And her mother was a very prissy sort of a woman, fine woman, but she belonged up in the ranks, And so Charlie was just a good old humble brother. And I thought I'd better ask him and let him ask her. And so I thought I could get by with the man better than I could talk to the women anyhow. So I said, one night I was leaving. Hope said, have you asked Dad yet? I said, no. She said, well, you ought to. I said, I know, I should, but I'm not. Hope said, I think it'll be all right. So when I went to leave that night, he said, see you later, Billy. I said, Charlie. He said, I said, could I talk to you just a little bit? He said, I said, come out here just a minute. Walked out on the porch, and I was just sweating and shaking. He said, I said, Charlie, I said, I want to ask you something. He said, oh, you can have her, Bill. Go on. Just be good to her. Oh my, I love him to this day. I said, Charlie, I can't make a living like you do. I can't give her the clothes like you can buy her. But I promise you this, I'll love her with all my heart. I'll work till my hands bleed to make her living. And I'll be as true to her as I know how to be. He was a German. He put his big hand over me. He said, Bill, I'd rather you would have her and be good to her than somebody that had a lot of money and would treat her mean. I said, thank you, Charlie. We got married. We didn't have nothing to start housekeeping on. Only thing we had, I tell you what we had, a little old place where I rented. My rent cost me $4 a month. And I went into the little old place there, and somebody gave us an old-fashioned folding bed. You remember that old folding bed? Straw mattresses, straw tick on it, and then we had a little old table we bought from Sears and Roebuck, and chairs. We had to paint it ourselves. And so I painted it, and we had 2 linoleum rugs got from Johnny Jobbers. That was just a second-hand place down into the Jeffersonville. I said that John Jobbers, so they could get the benefit of it, and so we got, I think they just cost $1.25 a piece. And I went over to Mrs. Weber. He was a junk dealer and bought a cooking stove, and I gave him $1 and something for it. And I had to pay $1.75 for grates to put in. I got an icebox from Public Service Company for 50 cents. One they took in on swap. So we went to shop housekeeping, but friends, it was just as paradise on earth. We had each other. I'd become converted in that time, become a minister, and was preaching, and I loved the Lord with all my heart, and we loved one another. And that's all we cared for. And listen, happiness does not consist of how much of the world goods you own, but how contented you are with the portion that's allotted to you. That's right, remember that. That's all we had. We were happy and lovely. I had a little church there they built for me. The little tabernacle stands today yet as a memorial, and we all, great crowds of people, come from far and near around the country to hear the simple gospel, and we were just doing wonderful. And I remember a lovely little boy was born into our home. I call him Billy Paul. I want him to be with me in the next meetings at Carlsbad as soon as I leave Arkansas here. And so he's 14 years old now, and a little later on, 11 months come along. Another lovely, sweet thing by the name of Sharon Rose. Just before Billy was born, we had saved enough money till I was wanted to take a little time off, and I went up to Double Jake, Michigan, to a meeting with an old man that had white beard and white hair by the name of John Ryan. And so I went up there, and on the road back, coming back, I seen a sign, great crowds of people everywhere, when I passed through Mishawaka. I thought, what are those people? And I went over there, and there's some of them in Model T Fords and some in Cadillacs, and they told me that I couldn't get nothing to, no place to stay, and they said, there's a conference going on here. The Pentecostal people are having a conference. The PA of JC, I believe it was PA of JC, denomination of Pentecost, called that. Well, I seen all kinds of people. I thought, well, that's a religious meeting. I believe I'll go in. Well, I never heard so much noise in all my life. Oh, church manners, they don't have it. They were screaming, shouting, carrying on. I thought, what in the world? I looked around there, and I got a tabernacle. Some of you might know the man's name. His name is Raw, Reverend Raw. Anybody happen to know Reverend Raw? And yes, someone here knows of him, Reverend Raw. It was in his church. Well, they were just clapping their hands and carrying on and dancing. And why? I said, isn't that horrible? People dancing in the church. I said, well, that's a shame. And I was sitting in my seat of the Swan School, sure enough. So I thought something, though, kind of got a hold of me a little bit. And I thought, well, now I'm counting my money. I had $2.15 left. And I went out and thought, well, now I can't stay in the tourist court because I ain't got the money. But I'm going to stay over, just got enough money to buy my gasoline to get home. So I went out that night and slept in a cornfield, and I knowed but I didn't have my very good clothes. And the very next morning, I went to the service, and that day, my minister's preaching, and how I noticed that night they said every preacher come to the platform, 150 more preachers come up to the platform. Was having a conference, international conference. They was all sitting on the platform. He said, we haven't got time for you, all of you, to testify. I went up. He said, just say who you are and where you're from. And he came to me. I said, Evangelist William Branham, Jeffersonville. Sat down. Well, come to find out, I was the youngest minister in the group of them. So then, that night, I thought they was bringing all kinds of preachers, and they chose an old colored man to bring the message for that night. Real old, just a little rim of hair around his head. He had an old preacher's coat on, had velvet collar, kind of a cut-away coat. Poor old fellow. Come out to the platform like this. And oh, I felt so sorry. I wanted to get up and help the old man. And he came out. And they had to have the conference up there on account of not having it in the south, because they had both colored and white together. And the old fellow was standing there, and all the ministers that day had been preaching on what Jesus done and so forth, but he took his text from over in Job somewhere there where it said, where were you when I laid the foundation of the world? And when morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. Well, whereas the ministers was bringing the activities of the church on earth, he went up into the heavens back yonder and come plumb back down about 10 million years before the world was ever formed, and come back down the horizontal rainbow with him. And about time he got down there, he let out a great big whoop and jumped up and clicked his heels together, said, glory to God, you ain't got room enough up here for me to preach. I looked at that, I said, well, if that will make an old man like that act like that, what will it do to me if I got some of it? I said, I want some of that. That's what I want. If it will make an old man like that, well, what will it do for me? So I went out that night in the cornfield and I began to pray. I said, Lord, let me get some of that. So I said, you give me favor with them people, and I prayed away in the night out there in the cornfield. I took had some sea circus trousers. My others was got all dirty in the cornfield, so I laid them on my seat and took the two seats and put them together out of my car, and I pressed my trousers at night, and I had my Suyasaka shirt. Nobody knew me, so I just laid it down there, Suyasaka shirt, and little old t-shirt and Suyasaka trousers rather. I laid them down there. Next morning, I got up, shined them all up. Meeting began at 10 o'clock. They had breakfast after breakfast, and I wasn't going to eat with them because I didn't have no money to put in. I just didn't eat with them. But they made me welcome and everything. I didn't know no one there, but a little fellow, I forget what his name was, he played a violin, a little curly-headed fellow. And so next morning, I walked in, sat down, and so after a while, I looked over, and another man came in and sat down. A colored man sat down by me, and a big bunch of people sitting there. So I was sitting there, and they said, we are going to begin the services. And they was talking, selling literature, and whatever they had. And he said, there was a minister on the platform last night by the name of Branham from Jeffersonville. Said he was the youngest man on the platform. We want him to come up and bring the morning message. Mercy, why? I never even seen a microphone. They had a microphone there. I thought, what? Well, I couldn't see a sack of trousers and a t-shirt. I just hunkered down real low like this. He announced again, said, anybody know where William Branham of Jeffersonville? Said, we want him to come and bring the message. 1,500 people nearly sitting there, not me before that. I just sat back there. No, sir. I was too country feel to get up there. So I just sat there real low. And so he announced it 2 or 3 times, said, anybody on the outside, we're paging for William Branham. I thought something told me, said, that's what you prayed for last night. If you want to get acquainted with them people, get up there. Lord, I can't do that. Siyasaka trousers and a t-shirt. I said, nah. So I was sitting there, and when he announced it again, this colored man looked over to me and said, do you know that man? Oh my, talk about on the spot. I said, I knowed. I had to lie or something or tell him. I said, look, fellow, look, just keep it to yourself. I said, I'm he, see, but he said, well, get up there, white man, get up there. I said, no. I said, I got on, look at them pants here. He said, them people don't care what you got on. They said, I want to hear you. I said, look, I can't get up there. I said, I don't. You just keep still. And he said, if anybody knows where, he said, here he is. Here he is. Whew, my, here he is. I thought, oh my, I could just feel my heart go. And my knees real weak. And my arms looked like they was going to drop off. Well, it just looked like something picked me up, and here I went walking up just as conscience, Suyasaka trousers and t-shirt. I got up there and I said, folks, I don't know very much about before them preachers who could really preach. Oh my, I said, I just want to say that I love Jesus, and sort of like that. And so he said, I started to walk off, and he said, well, speak a little for us, Brother Branham. I turned over and I said, I just don't know what to say. And I happened to think of a text, and then he cried. The rich man that when he lifted up his eyes in hell, I took that text, and then he cried. And I got to speaking, and the first thing you know, something hit me. I was lost out of this world for a while, and everybody got to screaming. I went outside when the service was over, and a great big fellow from Texas with cowboy boots on and a big cowboy hat said, I'm a preacher. I thought, well, brother, my Saka trousers aren't so bad after all. He had those cowboy boots and a big cowboy hat and had and be a preacher. And he said, I heard you say was an evangelist. I'd like to sign you up for a couple of weeks revival in Texas. I took his name. I said, oh, my Lord, you're just doing great things for me. I took that all down, a little bitty fellow with these little golf playing trousers on walked up and said, I'm from Florida, to have you over here for a couple of weeks. I seen there was just common people after all. So first thing, a woman come up from the Indian reservation, wanted me to go there. Well, I had enough invitations to last me about a year. I jumped in that old Ford, and it half backslid, and down the road I went. I rushed in at home, wife met me, and I said, "Oh, honey, I got something to tell you. I met the cream of the crop." I said, "My people who just scream and shout and jump up and down, they're not ashamed of their religion." I said, "My, the best you ever seen." She said, "Where they at?" I told her. I said, "Look here, I got a whole string here." I said, "My, I can just preach and preach and preach it." And you know what? They accepted me. Said, "Is that right?" I said, "Look, I'm going to quit my job and start right out." She said, "Well, we haven't got any money." I said, "How much money we got?" Said, "We got that $12 in there, payment on the Ford." I said, "Well, the Bible said, don't take anything when you go. See, don't take any script, or if you got two coats, give one to your brother." He said, "I will be with you." I said, "That's the way." He said, I said, "Will you go with me?" She, bless her heart, she said, "Yes, I'll stick with you." And so I went and told my mama, and mama said, "That's all right, honey, if you feel that." Well, and went, I had to tell her mother, and that didn't work so good. She said, "William," she said, "she's your wife. You may take her if you want to, but," said, "I don't want my daughter dragged out among that bunch of trash." Trash? Friends, I found out this, that what she thought was trash is the cream of the crop. That's right. And I say that with respect. Said, out like that, where all that carrying and screaming and carrying on like that, said, "Why don't you go on up there and be a pastor, and then someday they'll build your parsonage and all that." That didn't. Oh my. So I hope begin to cry, and so I said, "Well," she said, "I'll go with you." But anyhow, I didn't want, she said, how it would hurt her. So I just let it go. Went on. Friend, the little girl that was too good to be with that trash, I buried her just a little bit after that. Sorrow set in right there. I'll hurry just a few minutes that I got left, about 15 minutes. There's where sorrow struck me. Now, you let what my mistakes be your gain. You prosper by what I had to suffer for. Sometimes you see me standing here on the platform laughing. That's you don't know what's beneath there. That's right. I tell you, there's been a price paid that nobody knows but God alone. Right away, my wife taken sick. First thing, I lost my daddy. I ran over to the house to see him, picked him up on my arm like that. He looked up at me like that. He smiled. A doctor gave him a dose of medicine that killed him. One overdose of stretching for his heart, and it killed him. Of course, there's nothing said about that. The undertaker covers up the doctor's mistakes many times. Nothing I got against doctors, but I say there is nothing said about that. But some woman here not long ago trusted God out of California for her baby that died, and every newspaper and every magazine packed across the country, and the same time where one didn't have faith enough for deliverance, everybody criticized that. All the magazines and papers, and God healed thousands. You have to pay them to put it on paper or something like that. But look here, let me tell you something. The Bible said, "Come, let us reason together." Is that right? Listen, the same time the picture has been packed across the country telling people that divine healing can be trusted and everything like that, the doctor lost thousands times thousands of cases, and there wasn't nothing said about that. Is that right? Isn't that right? Listen, come reason together. Sauce for the goose is for the gander too. That's let me tell you, if one person being lost by divine healing with not enough faith to recover and is all branded as fanaticism, then if the doctors loses one case, branded fanaticism, sauce for the goose is for the gander. Is that right? That's right. But friends, what medical science and ministers ought to get together and cooperate together, knowing we're all working for the good of the people and for the glory of God, and work together. That's what we ought to do. But anyhow, my father, he was killed then by his doctor, gave him an overdose of medicine, and it killed him. And right away, my brother was riding on the side of a car, got his neck broke, died in other brother's arms. My sister-in-law died, my wife took sick, and was on the 37 flood. 1937 flood came up, and there was a sorrow. I never will forget it. Wife was laying just at the point of death. I went and I was praying for her, doing everything I knew. And every time I pray, it looked like I went and told my church, I said, she's going to die. Said, no, that's just. I said, she's going to die as certain as anything. My babies, both of them, were sick. The flood came up and everything. houses breaking over and rushing, and miles of water sweeping over the country. And they taken my wife out to the hospital, to the government hospital, temporary hospital. And I was on patrol duty, and I was riding up and down the streets and trying to get the people out. And I never will forget one horrible night, oh God, when I think of it, there in that critical hour, I had a truck there, a little patrol truck, and I was taking a boat. And I coming up the road, and somebody said, over on Chestnut Street, the dikes are about ready to break through, and said, there's a woman screaming for mercy over there, and nobody can get to her. Well, I was raised on the river and thought that I could do pretty good with the boat. And so I got the boat and set it in the water and started off. And I looked over there and I heard that mother. It was about 11 o'clock at night, just screaming, mercy, help me, standing out on the porch. And I got up there and tried to get the boat across and went way down and come out on the other side, the water sweeping down through the street. I went way back again and tried, and finally I hit against the post. And the mother fainted. I picked her up and put her in the boat. 4 or 5 little children, I got them in and went back and finally got to the shore. And just as we got to the shore, somebody said, my baby, my baby. Well, I thought the woman left a little baby in there. And back I went. And just as I got over there, I ran through the house, come to find out her, the baby, the little girl in there, about 2, 3 years old, and that's who she was talking about, and I didn't know it. And I was over there, and the dike broke through up there on Chestnut Street, poured down, and away went the building. And just as I jumped in my boat and had to run my hand in the water to jack the rope or my boat, then I got out into the stream and couldn't get it started. On down we floated, got out over on the Market Street there. Big waves are dashing against the side. I thought any minute I would go to the bottom. I knew there in that boat. I knelt down. I said, oh God, I know I have disobeyed you. And I believe, friends, if I went on back down there, when those people called me in, the gift of healing would have been manifested right there. That was God's program. But I failed to walk in what He told me to do. I listened to what people told me instead of what God told me to do. Don't never do that. You follow what God tells you to do, and then sorrows was on. And I prayed. I said, oh God, I know I've disobeyed you. If you'll just help me, I don't want to die. I don't want to be drowned out here in this river. Please, God, let me this motor start. Will you please? And I'd pull that string and the ice freezing it, and it chugged a couple of times, and that boat dripping and jumping and gushing like that. Dan got out in the main current. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, and I'd try and try, and it wouldn't start. And I prayed again. I said, God, my poor wife laying out there sick. My baby's sick. And here me drowned in the river. What, oh God, what can I do? And I said, if you will just help me, Lord. And I pulled the string again, and away it went. Oh my. I started right into the river, out of the river, and got on into come out way down towards Clarksville, and I come around and got back up and got to my truck. And some of them said, did you know the government just washed out when that dike broke? Out to the hospital, I went as hard as I could. I met a brother George D. Ark there. He said, oh, Brother Billy put his arms around me. He said, looks like things are close. He said, Brother Bill, if I never meet you again, I'll meet you in the morning. That was the last time I seen him in life. That's right. He left a little afterward. And I said, where's Hope? I said, I don't know. And I ran over there, and I met one of the officers of the government. I said, sir, what become of the hospital? Said, all washed through there. I said, did any of them get drowned? Said, no, they went out on a train to Charleston. And I ran and got in my car and started out the highway 62 leading to the little city Charleston. And when I got there, out there was about 5 miles of water done come through Lancasange Creek and cut it off. And I went and got my boat, and I couldn't even pierce that water. I'd start through there, and it would whirl the boat around like this. And I sat at this angle and just give it all the gas that I could and hit them waves like that. But it was so rough. You would come around side of them woods, and throw my boat back down this way, and I'd come back out down behind the government. And there I was caught in a little island there, like, and I'd sat there for days upon that island thinking. Some of them said the breast trestles went out from under the bridge up there, and everybody that went on that train was drowned, wife to children and all. I thought, oh God, how nervous I got. I walked the floors. I didn't know what to do. I thought, oh, what will I do if they are gone? And after a while, as soon as I could get over, the water dropped enough that they could get me across. And I got to Charleston. I was looking. I met an old friend of mine. I said, no, that train never washed off. Said, they went through, but I don't know where they're at. I went down. The dispatcher told me, said, a mother and 2 sick children. I put them off in Columbus, Indiana, but you can't get to them. Said, the water's cut off this side. I started walking back down the road, rubbing my hands, crying, saying, oh God, take me. Don't let me suffer. Let her take me, Lord. Don't let me have to go through this agony. Walking down the road, and a man drove up to me in a car. He said, I know what you're looking for. Said, you're looking for your wife, aren't you? I said, yes. He said, don't you know me? I said, I go with Mary May over there. I said, yes, I remember you. Said, your wife is dying in the Baptist church at Columbus, Indiana. And I said, surely not. He said, yes. Said, she's got tuberculosis. And said, you wouldn't even know her. And the doctor says she's going to die. She's laying right next to my girlfriend. He said, I know how to get you there if you want to go. I said, well, let's go, brother. And I remember that night when I ran into the building up there, the Baptist, they made a hospital. They had army coats everywhere. And I ran in there, boots on, where we waded the water. And I began to scream, Hope, Hope, where are you, honey? Where are you? Just beside myself, directly I looked over there, and I seen an old bony hand raised up. It was her. I ran over real quick to her and grabbed her up in my arms. I said, is the children alive? She said, yes. She said, I look awful, don't I? I said, no, honey, you look good. I said, you're going to be all right. I felt somebody tap me on the back, and I looked, and it looked like a doctor. He said, come here. He said, are you her husband? And I said, yes, sir. You Reverend Branham? I said, I am. He said, now, well, sir, I had to break this news to you, but said your wife's dying. Said, don't get her excited or anything. I said, doctor, surely not. Said, yes, she's going. And I said, oh, what is it, doctor? Said, galloping tuberculosis. Said, she'll just die right away. He said, just make her feel good as you can. He said, and both of your babies are sick. I'm tending to them over here in another home. Well, I went back and told her, I said, honey, you look good. And a little doctor, a friend of mine, Dr. Sam Adair, there in Jeffersonville, soon he'd let me. I brought them back down home, and there they laid there until the babies got well, and the wife gradually went away. Finally, we got her in the hospital. I had doctors to come back, look at her. There was nothing could be done. She took pneumothorax treatments and everything. Nothing could be done. And I remember standing there, and they bore holes down through her side and put that tube in there and collapsed that one lung. Listen, if I had it, she would hold my hand and cry, and the tears rolled down her cheeks. She'd look at me, just suffering, never done a bit of good, and I had to go over it. I'd never go through with it again. That's right, as she's holding my hand. But just to show you the way of a transgressor's heart, I never forget I was trying to work to get the bill paid off. And then one day I was out and I had a call come say, if you want to see your wife alive, come at once. I rushed out to the hospital and I never forget it. I jacked off my hat and threw it in the truck. I ran up through there real quick, and here come little Dr. Adair walking out. God bless his little old heart. He's a fine man. And he come walking out. He'd eat together, slept together, fish together, just bosom friend. And he came walking out, and he come walking down through the hospital. I seen him look at me, and I seen big tears drop off his cheeks, and he turned sideways. And I'd run into the room. I said, "What's the matter, Doc?" I said, "She ain't gone." He said, "I believe she is." I said, "Come, go in with me, Doc." He said, "Bill, don't ask me to do that." I said, "Hope's like my sister." I said, "I can't go in there. Don't ask me to." And the nurse come up and said, "Come, brother." Branham said, "Here, drink this little bit of medicine." I said, "No, I don't need it." He said, "Go ahead, Billy. That'll rest your nerves." I don't want it. I said, "No." He said, "Nurse, you go in with him." I said, "No, I don't want anyone. I'm going in myself. I'm going in." I said, "I love her and I'm going in." I walked to the door, opened the door, and there she laid all covered up like this, and blanket sheet pulled up over her face. I'd jerked the sheet down, and my heart was just a breaking. I put my hand on her perspiration on her forehead kind of felt sticky. I said, "Hope, Hope, honey." I said, "Speak to me once." "Well, just speak one time, won't you?" I was shaking her. Friends, if I live 100 years, I'll never forget what happened. Those two big brown eyes looked up at me. She was so weak she couldn't say nothing. She was smiling. She took her finger and she motioned, and I got down. She said, "Why did you call me honey?" I said, "Well, I said, "I don't know." She said, "Oh, I was in another land." She said, "It was so peaceful. I wasn't suffering." She said, "A great big buzz like a great Orion." And she said, "There's a man dressed in white, one on each side, taking me to my home. Oh, friend, there's a land somewhere, I believe." As she was dying, her eyes just opened up to see paradise beyond. She rallied for a little bit. The nurse came in, and she said, "Nurse, come over." She said, "I hope when you get married, you'll have a husband like mine." I said, "Oh, honey, I haven't done nothing." She said, "Oh, bless your heart." She patted me on the back, nursed around, walked out crying. She said, "Bill, I want to tell you a few things." Said, "I'm going." Said, "Don't cry." I said, "All right." She said, "Don't let my babies be pulled about from pillar to post." She said, "And some things I got to confess to you." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Do you remember one time and said you were going fishing and I called you, and that night we were going to Fort Wayne for a meeting?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You went, got me some stockings." I said, "Yes, I remember them." She said, "Them stockings was the wrong kind of stockings, honey. Them wasn't right." Well, what it was, I had been fishing. I went up home and we had to go to Fort Wayne, and I was going to preach that night at Fort Wayne. Her father lived at Fort Wayne, so I was going up there to preach. And there's different kinds of women's socks that you buy. One's called, name them. Somebody, is it chiffon? That's right. And what's the other kind? Rayon. Is it Raymond or Raymond? Rayon, which is the best chiffon? Well, they cost 60 something cents then. And she was taking a bath and she said, "Billy, you ran down at the pennies and got me some socks." And I said, "All right." And I was going down the street and she said, "Now remember, I didn't know nothing about women's clothes." And she was saying, "Get chiffon." And I was going on the street going, "Chiffon, chiffon, 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 chiffon." Somebody said, "Hello, Brother Branham." I said, "Hello, chiffon, 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 chiffon." And I met Orville Spawn down there, and he said, "Billy Perch is biting over on about that." And I said, "Oh my," I got talking to him. I forgot what she said. Well, I wasn't going to Penny's because I didn't know nobody there. But I used to have a little friend that'll come to my church by the name of Thelma Ford. She worked in a 10-cent store. And I know they sold them over there and went over. Then Thelma came up, said, "What do you want, Billy?" I said, "I want some socks for Hope." Now, Hope don't wear socks. She said, "Sure she does." She said, "She wears stockings." Oh, she said, "Stockings." I said, "That's right. That's right." I thought, oh, I've showed my ignorance already. And she said, "What kind do you want?" And I said, "What kind do you got?" She said, "I got chiffon and ray." "What's rayon, the cheap ones?" She said, "I got rayon." I said, "That's what I want. That's what I want." She said, "Hope, want rayon." And all I sounded like rayon, chiffon. I didn't know the difference, she said. And so she got them, put them in a sack. I said, "I want the full style, that thing that's got the thing behind them, that I don't know." I said, "That's the full style." And so, old fashion, full of fashion. That's what it was. And I said, "That's the kind that I want." And she got them ready for me. She put them in the sack, and it was only about 29 cents. And I said, well, give me 2 pair of them. And she said, are you sure of that? And I said, that's what she wanted. So I went back, and of course, you know how you men like to pop off to your women. And I said, look here. I said, I'm Abraham's son. I'm a little Yiddish. You go over the river shopping. I'll buy 2 pairs of stockings for what you can buy one, and have money left. I said, just I'm Abraham's son. Know how to do it, you see. Going on like that. And God bless her heart. She's in the grave tonight. I probably snow over it, but not altogether there. I still think of her. That's right. And she goes on. And there, when she said she wouldn't have, I thought it was funny. When she got to Fort Wayne, she wanted another pair of stockings, but she was lady enough not to say it. And she told me, she said, Billy, I give them to your mother. They was for an older woman than me. And I said, oh, God bless you, honey. I didn't know that. I said, that was all right. She said, you remember that one time you wanted to go hunting so bad, and we was at Louisville? You seen that little 22 rifle that you wanted? It cost me $3 and something to pay down on it, and you didn't have the money to pay on it. It's been about 2 years ago. I said, yeah, I remember that. She said, Bill, I've always wanted to buy you that rifle. She said, I won't be with you but just for a few minutes and now longer now. But she said, when you go home, look up on top of the old folding bed under that paper. I've been saving nickels to buy the rifle. She said, will you promise me you'll buy it? Oh my. When I went home and found that $2 and something laying under there, like to kill me, I said, sure. But I said, honey, you're not going away. She said, I hate to leave you, but said I must. She said, I don't mind it. She said, it's all right. Said, now another thing, I'm going to ask you, don't stay single. I said, oh, don't ask me that. Said, promise me that you won't stay single. My children will have a home to go to, not to be dragged around everywhere. I said, honey, I can't do that. And she said, promise me, won't you? Said, I got a little easier. And she didn't mind it no more than you mind taking a drink. She said, I just said, I hate to leave you and the babies, but she said, oh, Bill, it's so wonderful to call like this. And I said, well, I'll do the best I can. And she said, another thing. She said, you realize why I'm going, don't you? Oh, that's what hurt. She said, if you wouldn't have listened to Mama and would listen to, said, it would have been different, wouldn't it? I said, that's right, honey. I said, oh, what will I ever do? She said, do this. Don't be ashamed of this Holy Ghost religion. She said, it's the greatest thing in the world to die by it. She said, stay and preach as long as, said, preach, promise me you'll go right out into the fields where we're supposed to go. And said, promise me that you'll do everything you can. Said, and tell everybody that it's glorious when you get ready to leave here. It's wonderful. And I said, oh, honey, it's so good to see you go like that. And she said, I said, where do you want me to place you? And she said, you take me up on the hill. I said, I will take you out to Walnut Street, and I'll bury you there at the hill, your body. And I said, honey, I promise you, I'm going. If God won't spare me, I'm going right out into the field, and I'll never stop until the last drop of blood of life is gone from my body to do or to try to make an atonement. And I said, I'll do everything that I can to live right. I'll do right. And I said, look. And she said, goodbye. And I said, are you going? I said, look, on that morning, I said, so we'll be able to get together now. I said, if on that morning, I want you to go to the east side of the gate. And I said, I want you to stand there, and when it'll be terrible down there, I said, if I die before he comes, I'll be sleeping out there. I said, we'll get together, but I'm somewhere on the field and I'll be taken up. I said, you go there and wait for the children and stand there by the side of the gate. And then when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob coming in, start screaming, Bill, Bill, just as loud as you can. I said, I'll answer you there. She raised up her feeble hands. I kissed her goodbye. That was my last date with her. I'm on my road. That's right. Someday I shall go. When we took her down to the funeral parlor, I went home. I couldn't be satisfied nowhere. I went over to Mama's. I just, I was crying. I went home and they said, Mama said, stay over here. I said, no, I'm going home. We didn't have no furniture, but what it was ours. And so I went home to lay down, and just then Brother Frank Broy come up, said, Billy, I hate to tell you something, son. I said, well, I was just right there. Said, that's not it. Your baby's dying too. I said, can't be. Said, yes, it is. And away they took me out to the hospital. I see my little Sharon, my little girl. I couldn't call her. I wanted to call her Bible name. I called my little boy Paul after me and after St. Paul. And then I wanted to call the baby's a Bible name. And I couldn't call her Rose of Sharon. So I just called her Sharon Rose. And I went out to the hospital and the doctor met me. He said, Billy, she's dying. Don't go in there. And I stood there after the nurse turned me back and I ran down there and I went down where she was at. I looked at her and there was a little thing laying there. I never will forget. She's just 8 months old. And I remember I used to come home. She'd set out in the yard and I'd blow my horn like that, coming around the corner. And she'd go, goo, 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 just reach. Just love those little fellows. And she was suffering so hard till one of them little fat legs was moving up and down in a spasm and looked like her little hand was a waving. And I looked at her and I said, Sherry, honey, you know daddy? And I was trying to make myself strong. And I said, you know daddy, honey? And her little lips got to quivering. And when she looked at me, she was suffering so hard till her little eye went crossed. Oh my! When I seen that tender little blue eye cross, I didn't know it then, but I understand it now. There's never been a cross-eyed child come in line, but what I think of that. There's never been one pass over the platform, but what's been healed too. I didn't know the crushing hand to bring it forth, but I never think of it till I see that. That little eye crossing, and she was suffering so hard. And I knelt down. I said, oh, Jesus, please, God, I'm sorry for what I do. I said, don't take her from me. I love her, Lord, with all my heart. Please, God. Looked like a big black curtain come falling down. I knew she was gone. I raised up, put my hand over her head. I said, God bless you, my little darling little sweet angel. I'm going to put you into the arms of mother. And the angel is coming to pack you home in a few minutes. But some day, daddy will see you. I raised up my head and I said, God, you gave and you take away. I don't know why you're slaying me. I said, yet you may slay me. I'm going to trust you as Job did. I'm going to believe you. And I said, somehow you're breaking my heart. I don't know how I'm going to hold up any longer, but I said, God, I commit a little soul to you. Take it, Lord Jesus, put it on the altar with the mother, and someday let me come to see them. And as I did that, the angels of God sweetly come down and taken away her little breath and bore her away to be with her mother. And I placed her in her mother and put them down beneath the ground. When I stood there, Brother Smith, a Methodist preacher, a friend of mine, he got some clothes in his hand, walked over there, and I was standing there. He put his arm around me, said, Billy, brace up, honey boy, said, oh, Brother Smith, my soul is, oh, I don't know what to do. And I heard him say, with them clothes dropping upon the little casket, said, ashes to ashes, ashes to dust, earth to earth. I thought, God, what can I do? Sound like the wind blowed down through the pine trees. It sounded like I had a song saying, there's a land beyond the river, and they call us fit forever, and we'll only reach that shore by faith decree one by one. We gain the portal there to dwell with the immortal. Someday they'll ring golden bells for you and me. I turned from the grave. A broken-hearted went home. I couldn't rest. The days passed. I couldn't give up my wife. But that baby was a choice of my heart. I didn't know what to do, little sweet girl. And then I thought, oh, what will I do quickly now? One day I was working for the public service. I climbed up a pole early one morning to take off a pole meter. I was standing there and I was singing. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross. I was going, and I happened to look, and as the sun came up, me hanging there on that pole, working on these cross arms, I looked out on the side, and there looked like my figure was a wiggling on that, looked like a cross out there, and I thought, oh Christ of God, yes, it was my sins nailed you there. I'm sorry for what I done. Oh, I said, God, how could you ever put up with a person like me? You broke my heart. You ground me down, but what can I do? And I got real nervous, and I had on a pair of rubber gloves. Many of you linemen knows 2300 running right by me ran through the primary, and I thought, looky here, I can lay my hand on that primary in 1 minute's time. I'll be with Sharon. I jacked my glove off. I said, God, I lost my mind or something. I said, Shari, honey, I can't stand any longer. Daddy's coming to be home with you. I said, look at them, 2300 running there, break every bone in my body, electric. I said, oh, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And the first thing you know, I was sitting down on the ground. I don't know. I believe that if that gift hadn't been foreordained, there'd have been the end of Brother Branham right there. But God had something else to do. He had to grind that heart out and let me know that He's the one who rules and reigns. I went home. I couldn't stand it, couldn't work. Went over to Mama's, and Mama said, honey, come in. Let me make you quiet. I said, I'm going home. And I went home. It was kind of cool weather. I took the mail to the box and I went around. I was trying to batch. We didn't have much in our house. I had an old coat setting back there, but she lived like there with me, and we'd been together. That's been our home. And no matter how little it was, it belonged to her and I. And it was us. The whole thing wouldn't have been $3 worth of furniture, but it belonged to her and I. It was as worth as much as any of the good homes there is in the world, because it was ours. And I went back in there, the kitchen, cold frost coming up through the floor, and I never will forget. I opened up the mail. The first mail I opened up, it said on there, Miss Sharon Rose Branham. It was her little Christmas saving. The banker knew that she'd never draw it, so $1.80. He sent it to me. Oh, I just couldn't stand it. I broke down and started crying. It was getting towards night. I knelt down on the floor and I started crying and praying. And oh, what an hour. I couldn't hardly stand it. I went to sleep laying there. I dreamed that I thought I was out west, and when I was out west, I was walking down to the prairie and I was whistling that song. The wheel on the wagon is broken, sing on the ranch for sale. And I was whistling like that, and I seen an old prairie schooner, and a wheel broke down, and standing there by that schooner stood the most beautiful blonde-headed girl with a pony, pretty blue eyes shining, dressed in white, and I had my hat on my hat, and I passed by and I said, how do you do, miss? And I put my hat back like that, and she said, hello, Dad. And I looked around and I said, Dad? She said, sure. I said, well, young lady, I beg your pardon. I said, you are old as I am. How could I be your daddy? She said, Daddy, don't you know me? I said, no, Mom, I am afraid I don't. She said, you just don't know where you are, Daddy. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, where's Billy Paul? That's a brother. I said, what is this? She said, Daddy on earth, how was your little Sharon? I said, Sharon, my baby? She said, yes, Daddy. She said, remember, we are immortal here. When we come here, we're not little babies no more. We're all one age. And I said, oh, honey, are you Sharon? She said, I said, where's mother? She said, she's up at your new home. I said, a home? She said, yeah. I said, well, honey, something's wrong here. I said, Branham's never had homes. We are more like the vagabond people. I said, that we don't have no home. She said, but Daddy, you got one up here. I looked around over to my right, and there was a great, big, beautiful home, and there was light shining up all around. She said, Mother's waiting for you. I'm going to wait here for Billy. I said, all right, honey. I took out running as hard as I could, my hat in my hand. I ran right up to the step. When I got there, Hope would usually meet me coming out with her arms out, and I went up and ran up the steps just as hard as I could, and I got to the top of the steps. Here she came dressed in white, that black hair hanging down. She came running up to me. She raised out her arms. I ran to her, threw my hat down, and just knelt down by the side of her. She put her hand on my head. She said, Bill, what are you worried about, honey? I said, Hope, I can't stand it any longer. I said, I seen that Sharon Rose down there. She said, yes, Bill. She said, what you worried about? You're worrying about me and Sharon. And I said, honey, I just can't stand it. She said, stop worrying. She said, don't worry, we are lots better off than you are. And I said, that may be so, but I said, Hope, didn't she make a pretty woman? Aren't we proud of her? She said, sure. She said, aren't you tired? I said, honey, I just been preaching and praying for the sick so long, and that's the way I know I'll go. And it had to come. Hadn't come yet. I said, I just been preaching and praying for the sick till I'm afraid I can't hardly stand up. She said, won't you sit down? And I looked, and there was a great big Morris chair sitting there, and I looked at her, and she looked back at me. She said, I know what you're thinking. Down here one time, we had them 3 old chairs or 2 old chairs at the house, and